What if being a good parent isn't about having all the right answers, but being able to grow alongside your child? Welcome back to the You Potential podcast, where we talk to interesting people about how to live a meaningful life. I'm your host, Sean Maslick. If you're enjoying these conversations, please hit that subscribe button. Today, I'm joined by the brilliant Dr. Todd Kashdan. He's a renowned psychologist, well-being researcher, and best-selling author of The Art of Insubordination, Curious, and the Upside to Your Dark Side. His work explores how we live with courage, curiosity, and purpose in every day. In our conversation today, we focus on something deeply personal, parenting. Todd shares his journey as a father and what it means to show up for your kids with flexibility, honesty, and heart. We talk about how humor and play strengthen connection, how our childhoods shape our parenting styles, and why questioning authority, yes, questioning authority, can actually help build trust. This is a refreshing and real conversation around parenting, not something to master, rather something that we're consistently learning. Todd's insights are real, science-backed, and deeply human. I hope you enjoy this fascinating conversation with Dr. Todd Kashdan. Todd, welcome to the show.
Great to be here again.
I appreciate that you wore your red and white shirt because Canada Day is coming up on July 1st.
Most Americans now place Canada number one, so that fits perfectly for me.
Todd, I always enjoy our conversations. I find you a highly thoughtful individual, very charismatic, and the way you speak helps us understand some of these concepts that we struggle with. One of them, and I say struggle because I think struggling is good, but one of them for me, what I've seen you write about lately has really piqued my interest, and it's about parenting. I saw you write something about what it means to be a great father. I thought we'd start there. Todd, what does it mean to be a great father?
Yeah, so I would love people to respond with their own answers to this question. For me, since my kids were at 5 years old, they could recite the three principles of Todd as their dad, which was, one, I'm going to make you laugh. Like, I'm going to be the nucleus of the humor in your life and your humor style. But it's just basically, I'm going to make you laugh. Two, I'm going to teach you stuff. That's my job. You're going to ride a bike. You're going to ride a skateboard. Maybe we'll try surfing together. You're going to learn how to read. You're going to learn statistics. You're going to think in probability, not at the age of 5, but eventually. And then the third one is, I'm always going to be there. Like, there is no question. So now that my kids are older, if it ends up being 3 o'clock in the morning and they're trapped on a bridge and their car broke down and there's no Ubers and their phone battery's dying and I am exhausted and I'm basically in, perfect REM mode, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to go save them. That's my job.
I love this idea of the three principles.
There's something to be said. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, 17 years later, I believe, are your eldest. How have you seen those principles impact or influence their lives?
It's cool. So as we are speaking right now, I just got back so my twins are now 18 and we just got back from our orientation to college. And we had a long car ride there, long car ride back. And because of these three principles, and we can go further into this really important element, which is I get intel. I get all the intel I don't probe about their dating lives. I don't probe about what things they might have experimented with that may or may not be illegal. I don't probe whether they've cheated on their tests or not. I just get access to information because those are the guiding principles. Is I'm there to be there is the third principle. And so what that means is I'm not there to punish them. There might be a punishment at some point. I'm there to help them figure out the world and figure out themselves and figure out other people. And that you can't do that if I don't get sufficient information about what was the situation, why do you behave this way, what are your thoughts about morality in this situation, and then what are your thoughts if someone else your closest friend did the exact same thing, how would you respond? And when you have access to information, you get to be a great parent. If you don't have access to information, you think you know everything, you're trying to control your kid, you lack intel, you don't even get a chance to be a great parent.
You said many times there, your thoughts, your thinking when you're referring to your children. It's everyone's dream as a parent to get this intel that you talk about. Yet it seems we so often try to, like you talked about at the end, control our kids. I'm curious, how do you navigate this inner, like, I mean, maybe it's just me, but I've got like, oh no, you should do it this way, or you got to listen to dad here. How have you been able to like let that go and hear their thoughts?
Yeah. So your kids are still half the age of my kids. So there's that. You've got lots of wild approach avoidance conflicts coming up. Two is none of this is easy. But it's actually the most fun. That's why I love talking about this right now. It is so much fun to talk about. And if there's any single thing that could come out of this conversation is for men to talk to men or women about parenting. I think a lot of men keep it close to the vest. And so they're losing access to wisdom of there are multiple ways of approaching the same situation. And that's how our dads behaved, our grandfathers behaved. I mean, we're like the first generation of dads that are really openly talking about this is a tough thing. But for me, there's a little bit of trauma bonding that occurs with other parents is when let me give you an example. So I like to talk about the thing that just happened. So I just got back from 1 week. So where I live, there's a thing called Beach Week where all the high school seniors that graduate in the entire county, so we're talking about over 100 college, 100 high schools, they all go down to the same beach. They rent places and they just drink, party, date, all that kind of stuff. Like whatever you did at age 18, that's what they're doing. Now, somehow, some way, in a house of 18-year-olds, there was one adult chaperone, one adult. It sounds at the start of like a Marvel superhero movie, who was willing to stand up and go down with them and be the voice of reason. And that was me. Like and when I met other parents that were down at this beach, they were like, we have 4 dads in our house of 8 kids. You're the lone dad of 18-year-olds. And so one of the things about the reason that I'm still alive today and all 18 kids are still alive today is because I gave them an Oscar-winning speech in the beginning of the week. And one of the principles was just what we're talking about, which is like, I'm not here to narc and tell your parents everything you do when you're here. I'm here to nip problems in the bud, solve problems, and then try to envision future problems that might possibly. It's the only way I can do that is if I get intel. Like you have to give me X information and trust me that I will use it for the forces of good to make you have the best time.
Wow, that's fascinating. What an experience. I mean, just to be having your daughters allow you to do that speaks to your relationship.
Thank you.
But I'm curious here. Like you said, I'll use that, whatever you provide me, the intel to make sure you have a great time. But my question was going to be, how do you balance this? Like, oh, wait, you can't do that versus like, hey, I'm going to let you still have the best time. Like if some questionable things are going to happen, and how do you speak to that part of you that's like, whoa, you shouldn't do that. I'm walking myself through this question and maybe it's
this is great. This is great.
Let it roll, Sean. Just, yeah.
Sean, your stumbling through this question is a perfect exemplar of like what it's like to imagine being in the situation. Because I mean, in an ideal world, which this part we can control, we can actually create, is like you should be the parent of all the kids that are in your vicinity, your local environment. And that's kind of how I view myself. I think that's why all these parents were comfortable of saying like, hey, we know you're weird. We know you're like kind of an unusual personality, but we know that you would fight 15 marauders coming to the house with battle axes and flails and maces if necessary to protect the kids. And they know that's true. And a lot of people would say they would do it, but I don't know how many people actually, push comes to shove, would actually put their body and get harmed to protect. Like that's what I would do. So for me, how to get this in terms of how to balance that is I don't make rules about, and I expect people to disagree in the comments, and it'll be great conversation. Can you or can you not use marijuana? Can or can you not use alcohol, which is illegal at the age of 18? Can you or can you not have a sexual relationship, which I don't want to know anything about whatsoever? Um, you know, the only rules that I really had was like the underlying goals that I had for the trip, which is my goal is to walk away at the end of a week. Nobody drowns in the water. It's a beach trip. Never leave a brother or sister behind. Things go awry at 1 a.m. and afterwards in the nighttime. No problematic romantic interactions or relationships. That's a big freaking bubble, but that was like primary concern of mine is like, hey, if necessary, I'm not coming in your room, but I will knock on your door if my spidey senses tell me psychologically there's a questionable character who might do questionable things in there. I just will knock on the door, might have a conversation with him or she, like after that, in that situation. And so it wasn't rules. It was more like, in order to have all the rewards and all the riches and all the treasure chests that get access to you, we have to protect ourselves against possible threats and failures and, major, problematic interactions. And so if you go with that route in terms of labeling punishments and rewards, then you don't have to go through a litany in terms of what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, in terms of what you do with your bodily autonomy.
Very interesting. So, I mean, I like this. You're talking about these rules and these goals. You use the word principles. I mean, with your children, you had principles, but you had principles on this trip. It really sounds like you're a guy that operates on principles.
Yeah, I do. And and the thing is, when you operate on principles, you're going to get a lot of friction because when you state not claims about like what's true and what's false, but in terms of I'm going to live my life this way. There's going to be people that have a big thumbs down, like it's the movie Gladiator with Russell Crowe, and just tell you that the way you live, I don't accept. I don't want to be near you. I don't want to be part of you. And part of becoming wise with age or without age is to say, that's great. I'm so glad I revealed my principle because we should never hang out. We would never be friends. And now I know where you stand, and I have no ill will. We just will never break bread and break bourbon together.
Many people could take that perspective, and there would be a lot less fighting in this world. I've read about you talking about the probability of being a great father that we kind of are touching on here, but specifically when you started writing about growing up without a father yourself and the unappreciated trials of being a boy and a man. It strikes me as very interesting how you can have this house of 18-year-old girls, create this space that they all have a lot of fun, no one drowned, yet there was little to no modeling of how to be a father for yourself. How did you learn how to become a father?
The worst, most inefficient way possible, just trial and error. I mean, honestly, I know a lot of people listening did not have a mom or dad growing up. I know a lot of people did not have an engaged mom or dad. They might have been present, but they weren't actually fully there. And in these situations, there's not enough stories. Like my story is not interesting enough for a book or a movie. It's enough just to talk about it in a podcast, which is that you can transform everything in one generation. And it's a beautiful thing. I mean, it's, my father abandoned me and my twin brother at the age of 2, left my mom who had a double mastectomy with another woman, ended up marrying that woman, but I could care less. Didn't pay child support. So she had twin 2-year-olds trying to work at a supermarket. She passed away when I was 12. And in one generation, me, and there's nothing magical I did. It's really just trial and error, which is just, and also a commitment to principles, which is I'm not going to let little creatures grow up the way that I did. And when, there's an interesting research on people that are it's weird. They don't have daughters. Most of the research is on sons of substance abusers. And what they find is that if you're primarily your father, was a substance abuser, that there's a bimodal distribution, which just means that there were two really huge clusters of people. There's one group where they became big, huge alcohol abusers or drug users themselves, or two, they avoided it completely. And you can, to me, I like to extrapolate from that research and think about, you may have experienced terrible things, kind of bad things, unfair things as a kid, and you could be in the group to make sure that none of that, you create protective mechanisms so that the next generation does not have to experience an unfair amount of that. And I think that there's a penalty for those of us that didn't have engaged parents, but I don't think we should walk around with that as if as a name tag where I seek pity and sympathy for the difficulties I face. I've had decades to work with this, and I think all of us should basically try not to be enslaved by our past, but use it as a comparator of, this will not take place again on my watch.
Really, really interesting here, talking about the penalty and walking around with this label. I even look at your research, your research, your career. It sounds like you went to clinical psychology. I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but then you started studying the more positive psychology, which I know you have different views on what that is. But it seems like from an early age, you had your own call it principle, maybe, that you aren't going to walk around with a penalty. Maybe I'm getting this wrong, but where did that come from? How at that early age, did you decide to have these principles when, I look at my childhood, a lot of my principles were given to from my father. He had certain principles that I adore, but you didn't have that. So yeah, I'm curious how you started to come to terms with having principles when they weren't modeled to you.
That's a good question. Let me tell you an interesting moment in my career that a distinguished, eminent scholar, said the exact same thing you just said. So when I decided I worked on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange on Wall Street. My grandmother was one of the first women to work there. So I was basically supposed to be the next Gordon Gekko. And then I realized I want to go into psychology. So I switched to psychology. And when I interviewed for grad schools and I got potential offers, Irving Gottesman, University of Virginia. And I sat down with him. He passed away relatively recently, but he was one of the greatest researchers on schizophrenia. Just look him up. And we talked for a while. I have no memory of what we talked about. I just remember his denouement, where he was like, you know what? You're supposed to be in jail. You're not supposed to be here. You should have failed out of school. I don't know who you are, how you got here, and he put his hand out and just shook my hand. I never met him before. Never met him since. And just whatever happens, whether you get into University of Virginia, you should be proud of yourself that you got here. And I almost broke down and cried because it was the first time. And I must have been 23, 4, that anyone had actually addressed that there was this past that was in there, because that was never the narrative that I walked around with. And I walked out of that and I was like, oh shoot, actually I did take this trajectory and put the train back on the rail so it could actually have some momentum and go do things. So to be honest, serendipity, because I didn't really think about it that much. I really just think it's just temperament. I just have this temperament, that hyperthymic temperament is what a therapist once called it, where it's this manic energy without the depressive episodes that intermingle with it. And so it's goal directed, and it's this excess confidence and kind of this excess ambition. And so it has a dark side to it as well, but it is what leads to really large quantities of potentially good work. But you burn a lot of relationships on the way. That's the sacrifice. But I needed that to cope. I coped by going to the gym, and I coped by working. And then, this is probably more of the information that you asked for. I've had lots of people tell me over the years, I wish you had time for me. And I've gotten that feedback many a times over the course of my 5 decades on the planet. So there's always a trade-off.
Yeah, so when did you start to hear those conversations where coping? Because I like the word you use, cope. Like you needed it, you needed the work,
Right.
the research, you needed the gym because yeah, your upbringing was challenging, but yet on the other side of that, it's impacting others. So when did it go from coping in coping in a healthy way to now impacting relationships?
Well, I think it was in college that my friend Josh Partnow, who's now the head physician at an ER in California. That's what's cool about seeing your college friends a couple years later. Is I remember, he will remember this, but for me it was very impactful. We were hanging out at a bar. It was my birthday. We were there and my birthday turned at midnight. So there was this woman who had this shirt that said, "It's my birthday, give me a kiss." And then at midnight, she's like, "It's your birthday now." So she took off her shirt and then put it on me. And then he came up to me at the end of that night as we were walking home and said, "You know what? Like, I love spending every minute with you. I just wish you could give more than 15 minutes to each one of your friends at a time." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he just lit into me. And it was so good. Like he just basically like provided a mirror to the fact that I never properly weighted my friendship sufficiently to give them my time. I was always just bouncing to the next amazing thing, cool thing, possibility. And that conversation transformed me. It just made me realize like, oh, I have to stop and sit on the plateau of awesomeness and let the conversation ride its entire course out as opposed to jumping to the next peak.
You know, we all have those moments that were like, wow, that was insightful. That conversation was really insightful. Like the one you just described there, I could tell it was you opened your hands up. I find for myself, I have those moments, but then, you know, life gets busy again and I find myself needing that same old conversation again and again. How did that insight impact you when you started like having to be more around with your children? You know, at a young age, they're super needy and there's this push pull now. You're like, oh, these things that I've never seen before. Children, I adore them, but you know, my personality, I want to get out there. I want to produce some articles. I want to get to the gym.
Yeah, there's no easy answer. So once I had kids, so you think about life as this jagged profile of priorities, where you've got family, you've got friends, romantic partner, taking care of your body, taking care of your mind, and then you've got like just whatever strengths or values you have, like, you know, focusing on like helping humanity, educating the public about science, developing wisdom, being curious, trying to be a creative, impactful player in the planet, all of these things, like be a good steward of the planet, you know, all these variables. And so really you have to constantly take stock of, is my jagged profile sufficiently fitting with the person that I want to be? And many times, if you don't find the answer is, oh, I'm off kilter, then you're not doing it. Because there's just no way you can regularly look at that profile and say to yourself, oh, I'm good. And just 90 times in a row. Can't happen. Like there should be something where you say, there's too much of a deficit there. And the one thing that I always filled was play and love. So those were two that just like, I had those down. Like I was always going to be playful. Well, not always, but like regularly be playful, choose people that enjoy play. And that can just be wordplay. This conversation here, like it's play. We're bouncing ideas around. We're talking about things, even though we're going to dark recesses of humanity. But it's fun because a lot of people don't ask those questions. So it's play because we're talking about things that you wish this stuff would come up when you're at a barbecue. But instead, you're talking about the local football or, you know, rugby team or whatever it is that's going on. And then the other one was love. And the thing about having kids and the thing about not having parents is you get a second chance. Like the gift is mine, is like I have like this unconditional love coming towards me from these little cretins that are crawling around all over the place. And it's like, I'm going to take advantage. I'm like, to use a pernicious word, I'm going to exploit this opportunity, give and get as much love as possible. And even to this day, like, you know, and to the kind compliment you gave earlier, I cannot remember a single time that my girl has ever said to me, like, just stop, like, stop hugging me, stop kissing me, like, stop telling me how amazing I'm. Like, they just, I think the reason is it's not me. I think the bar is so low for dads because I think a lot of dads just don't. And I'm going to give like the benefit of the doubt. I think a lot of dads like don't have the capacity built up to actually just like give of themselves because a lot of them didn't get that from the world and from their parents, especially if they had, sisters. Like usually the boy takes a hit, and there's, lots of good research on this right now in terms of what the consequences are. And I'll just give the annoying societal caveat. I'm not saying let's ignore the woes and ills and difficulties of women. I'm just saying there's something going on with the boys are not all right. And when the boys aren't all right, then the boys become suboptimal parents. And so we should be we should be interested in the sociological experiment that's constantly happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I appreciate your comment there. And I'm also grateful that we can have this conversation about which is sounding like the boys, the fathers. I got a question here. Your Thelma was your grandmother, right?
Selma, yeah.
Is that her name? Selma?
Selma.
Selma. She worked on the New York Stock Exchange, which is fascinating. What was her personality or temperament like?
Oh, yeah. There's an article coming out tomorrow about her. So first of all, our whole love language as a family is sarcasm. So if you, Sean, joined the text exchange of my family, like there's one cousin I have, Matt, shout out to you. He's quite short. So as soon as Tinder and these dating apps started to create these filters for height, that became 80% of our conversation as a family of like how this is going to affect Matt. Like Matt, that's the end of Matt for intents purposes. And this is how we express our love. It's our way of saying we're thinking about you. I read this article. I was thinking about you. I care about your relationships. I'm not just going to tell you, I hope everything goes well in all of your dates. We're going to make fun of you. And that's our love language. And my grandmother was like this all the time. Like I remember when she was in her 70s and, her body's breaking down, her mind's breaking down. And, she had thoughts of, possibly ending her own life. And, everybody was upset at her except for me. And I was her favorite grandson. She had a lot of them. Well, I was the oldest of all her grandkids. And I went into her room. She was in a hospital. And I said, Grandma, as soon as we can't make fun of each other, as soon as you do not have like the working memory capacity to keep up at our high energy, highfalutin conversations, teasing each other, when you can't do that and your brain is like, it's really linear, then I get it. But your brain is still alive. Like your body's falling apart, but your brain's still there. And I said, if your brain does it, if your brain falls apart, I get it. I support it, but you're not there yet. And she's like, you're right. That was it. And, and then I pulled out to our whole family conversation and said, it's not selfish. We don't know what it's like to be in her body that's decaying. But, and instead of like making her feel guilty and ashamed of that she wanted to leave this earth, I just told her, we still have fun talking to each other on the phone. And so there's a great source of pleasure and meaning still. And when that disappears, you can do whatever you want.
It sounds like it's so interesting, like this relationship you had with her. I hear play, and you talked about your relationship with your children is around playfulness as well. I can't help but imagine the way she had a relationship with you has impacted the one you have with your daughters.
Oh, she's a whack job, man. I remember when I was younger.
You called yourself the weird guy at the start when the parents were saying that you were going to go down the house. So whack job, weird guy, cut from the same cloth.
So she took my brother and I when we were 12, and I had these neck problems. Like I had to go to these chiropractors and these physical therapists, and I worked out hard. I was a football player, and you get smacked in the head and you should be injured. But I was like, I'd wake up and my neck would be bothering me. I'm like, Grandma, like, dude, what is this thing? And she's like, I probably should have told you that you've been sleeping. I read this article about Albert Einstein and I forgot it was like Carl Sagan, and they used to sleep on dictionaries and encyclopedias, thinking that like in the course of sleep that it would like infiltrate subconsciously into their brain. I was like, and I look underneath my bed, and she's got all these goddamn books under my mattress. And I was like, what the hell? I'm like, that's how my neck is bothering me. Just like you didn't even like even it out on the left side or the right side of just like shoved in there that goes in there. It's just like, that was my grandma. My grandma is like very scientific thinking. And yet when it came to, she's a Jewish grandma. She just put intelligence, creativity, and wittiness as these pillars. And like, she wanted that in all of her grandkids. And so that scientific mind would just still like do anything to put her, her gross, hairy toes on the scale to make sure that I still had like constant intellect, creativity, and wittiness to the detriment of my neck.
That's great. There are principles again: creativity, intelligence, and wittiness. And I feel like people who would know you might say you share some of those principles.
Listen, if we believe she's looking down, she would be extremely happy to hear that, because that was her main objective.
I want to go back to thank you for sharing that about her.
No, these are great, and I've never told these stories publicly to anybody, so this is fun.
Oh, well, I appreciate it, because my mind was going is like, where did this way of being of Todd come from without and you know what? In the back of my mind, it's going. My father, I mentioned earlier, he's a great dad, but he never had a dad, and I often wondered where he learned it. But my baba, which is my grandmother, she was this stern Ukrainian lady who ran a business, it was called Anne's Party Kitchen. It was like an old diner, and she worked hard, but relationships mattered. Like really, relationships mattered, and good food, and she wasn't always around because she was cooking and running the business. But my dad, relationships matter with him, and good food matters. And it's interesting how these feminine, I guess, models in our lives really can impart lifelong impactful lessons, such as your case as well.
I'm glad you said that, because there's this interesting bias, particularly in the States. I don't know if Canada has the same thing. The idea of a single mom can't do it on their own. And we'll kind of put, Baba in this kind of the same category, and it requires like a male role model to go in there. And I definitely want to put something out there of just saying that's a testable hypothesis, and I haven't seen the evidence that would question that a woman can't do it all herself. Not saying that in terms of life balance, it's not incredible suffering, but I don't think that we should second guess someone until there's evidence to prove otherwise.
I think there's something there. I really do.
Think about this, Sean. Think about this hypothesis. So imagine you break society in half, and half them get a single dad to take care of the kids, and then half them get a single mom to take care of the kids. Who do you think is gonna do the next generation, the younger kids? Like, who's gonna do better?
Well, as you're saying this, I'm just thinking, you're from New York, right?
Yeah.
Here's a Canadian totally stereotyping, but a single dad, a single grandfather in that same generation as your grandmother, raising you in New York. Would you have turned out so creative, intelligent, and witty? I don't know.
I think witty.
Or would you have been witty?
I think it would be like biting wit, though, right? The kind of...
Oh, yeah.
Like I will avoid fights or start fights because I just say something so acerbic.
I think there's something to be said for it, that being raised by a female with a male child it could be great. Maybe you should test that. You like to research.
Or maybe it's the cross-gender comparison is what works, right?
Oh, yeah.
Father to daughter and then daughter to sons, because you sort of get the androgyny of everything that's there. You got the temperament of the kids, and you've got the temperament of the adults. So, and this is why I like being a scientist, is when people throw out these ideas, online and in conversation, is I try to respond as much as possible. Great hypothesis, not theory or truth. We should test it. And then I like to kind of turn it into question form. And then it sort of like takes the air out of the the biblical like statement that people often make of this race is worse than this race, and this race is this, and this gender, and this sex, and this sexual orientation. It was like they're all questioned. One of my favorite findings I used to teach in abnormal psychology classes was that even though I would have never hypothesized it, there was a lot of research showing that a gay couple that are two women fared equal or better than a heterosexual couple in terms of raising kids to have healthy personalities and healthy levels of maturity in terms of dealing with like ethics. And lots of people hate that finding, but the data are the data. And that's, when you start thinking afterwards, you start thinking it kind of makes sense. Like, right, you would face more difficulties, you'd face the stigma of society, you'd be a defensive pessimist, hoping for the best and bracing for the worst. You would think at different levels of analysis, the individual relationships, also society and a larger culture. And maybe if you're part of the majority, you don't think in those multiple levels at the same time.
Very interesting. You talked about how you get a play, and it just sounds like that's what you're doing as a scientist. Like, this is an example. You're curious about it, so you research it. You wear it even on your shirt right now. Science.
I mean, it's like you should think, everyone should think of it as a philosophy of life. Is like, do you go through the world trying like, I wonder why. Like there's like so many hornets that are on that tree, but the adjacent tree there's not there. Like what's the nutrients? What's the reward? Or you just walk past it and say, my God, like to stay away from nature because look how dangerous it is.
You can tell you wrote a book called Curious. I want to go down this route, but I'm getting pulled back to the parenting and from the father, because I mean, I'm right in the thick of being a parent right now. I'm wondering your take on, earlier we talked about, like we were talking raising our children and trying to listen to them. I saw a piece you wrote about the cult of high achieving kids. How do we remove that belief that our kids are the best? And you said earlier, like kids are second chance almost, but I know you never meant it in a way of raising this NHL hockey player, because I never got to be it. So what have been your observation? What science have you seen in your experiences on how do we eliminate this cult of high achieving kids? And I ask it because I see it everywhere around me right now.
I love the Canadian example. Go right to hockey for the sport.
Maybe that's because I'm mentally battling it with my own 9-year-old. I'm like,
no, this is so. Let me go a little bit adjacent, but related to this topic right off the bat. Now that my 18-year-olds are about to start college, one of the benefits of that colleges and universities have become more selective is that actually it can make all of us just take a step back and say, no matter what your kid does, they have almost no chance to get into the top tier of colleges. Now, this doesn't mean you abort the whole mission and just turn them into, masonry. What it means is that you can say this to your kids, which is what I said to my kids when they were 15. When they were 15 years of age, Raven and Chloe, I told my daughters that, I went to a very selective college, which I would never get into now. And you have an option of a couple paths. Now, this was inspired by them saying to me, how do I get into a really great college over the next 3.5 years? I said, you have at least two pathways. One pathway is you're going to get into University of Virginia, the best school in the state that I live in right now, or an Ivy League school, and that's going to require you're going to take SAT, prep courses, achievement test prep courses. You're going to get tutoring. You're going to have, if you start a club, especially for like an elderly community population, teach them how to like code or, like do their taxes online. Like that's the kind of club, that's the kind of extracurricular activity that colleges love to see. Intergenerational generativity from young to old. And you study on the weekends and you'll master and you'll get over an A in all of your classes. But the price is you love sports, you love hanging out with your friends, you love partying, you love going to dance clubs, You like to skateboard at the time. And so say bye-bye to those things, because the people that get these schools, while you're doing that, they're doing an internship at the British Parliament across the Atlantic Ocean. Or you have good genetics, you're pretty good at taking tests, you do fine, just do your homework. I'm not going to be on top of you, and enjoy like this rich, complicated, sophisticated life, because you only have one chance to be like in high school and, before like adulting, and the word insurance and mortgage and grout becomes part of your everyday vocabulary that goes in there. And I didn't put my thumbs on the scale. I didn't say, I want you to go to Ivy League school like me. I didn't say, get a PhD like me. I am really glad they both chose path B and not path A. And I think I would love parents to think about this and offer it as like you're at a restaurant, in terms of these are the options that are available. And just whatever you choose, you could switch paths anytime, but do it with intention. And if you do want to have a good social life, and we do know that, this is the number one predictor across culturally of what predicts happiness. Doesn't matter how much you like happiness. We kind of all want a decent amount of happiness, lasting, significant, meaningful interactions and relationships. If you want that, path A of that hardcore studying is not the path where that ends up happening.
How proud of them were you when they made that decision?
I love the way they live their lives. Like they both got into fine schools. If they got into better schools, it would be, to me, not even noticeable difference from the school they're in. I said, if you spend extra 10 hours a week studying, the school that you would have gotten into would have no impact. Nobody would look at your job application and be like, wow, oh my God, I can't believe you went there. Like you would. So you won. What I regularly like to do, and I suggest this to all parents, is psychologically help your kid see the past version of them and their version of the ideal version of who they want to become, and constantly like offer that insight of, hey, you know how you wanted to do this? Ask yourself if the behaviors and habits that you're engaging in now, do they push you in that direction? So that's a gentle way of saying you might be off the rails a little bit between your current self and your ideal self. Or even better, psychologically for your kids, it's like, remember we had that conversation when we were 15? Look at this picture of you guys at high school prom. Look at how many friends you guys have. This happened because you chose path B and not path A. And that's, honestly, you got into a great college. Yeah, big deal. There are better colleges. But you got this and that. And you're going to the gym with me. Look at your lats. Check out your triceps. All that stuff together. And that's like, I'm like, that's the way to live. So by you as a parent, not you, like all of us together.
Yeah.
When we highlight, bold, italicize the things we see, like don't assume just because it's happening that it's being ingrained in them and intentionally absorbed into their sense of self. It's up to us to dog-ear the page, lick our finger on the page and be like, hey, listen, this is what I see. Look, you don't just say your kid's amazing, they're smart, they're beautiful. You, with great precision, you describe exactly what they've become because you've seen the entire journey. And I don't think enough people spend enough time doing this, because I know when I die that my kids will remember this, of like, I've helped them clarify the elements of themselves that are excellent that they've constructed, and I've given them a way to articulate it.
Todd, I got goosebumps thinking about my own self and kids. Like your word choice of bold, italicize the things that they're doing well and help them clarify elements of themselves. I mean, that is the goal. And I'm just reflecting on myself here. It's like I find myself at times caught in like, yes, bolding and italicizing the things that I wanted them to do versus like the things they're doing and who they become. Like, geez, that's good. As soon as we get off this call, I'm going right upstairs and,
Aw, I love that. It's great.
But I think it's hard. Like, I shouldn't say hard. we have to have, or I guess going back to your thing, principles and intentional thoughts that, hey, I'm just helping guide this creature. I'm not sculpting this to nobody.
Yeah. And you know, like my little one who I haven't been talking about, my who's going to be 13 in a month from this conversation. She's my most challenging one because she's a very highly sensitive person. And so I have made more missteps with her, even though you'd think I'd be better the third time around. And so what I'm even more intentional about saying all the things that like are incredible that she does, so that it's really clear to her. Like the world is definitely more challenging for her than my twins. And so it's hard because like for me, like, you know, a lot of things bounce off me like bullets made out of gumdrops. And for her, like these bullets actually like pierce her skin. And so I like she's like my Buddha. Like I'm regularly like have to be like, okay, softer, slower, you know, easier. And then, you know, I have to be reminded, you know, by her mom of like, listen, like she's not Chloe and Raven. I'm like, I know. I just like it was so easy with them. And so yeah, it's probably worthwhile like just revealing that because it's don't think by any stretch of the imagination I've got this down.
Yeah. I think if we thought we had it down, perhaps there is a moment to reflect. Is she more like their mother, your young one,
No.
personality wise?
Yes. Yeah. She's definitely closer to him. Yeah. My Raven has my personality. Chloe has my brain, and Violet has my sense of humor.
Nice.
Voltron, you put them together.
Voltron, and there's Todd. You know, relationships you alluded to, like huge part of a life well lived and happiness. You write about like we should celebrate ending of relationships. It seems to me there's an ending coming up here. Your daughters are going to college. Do they have to live away for college?
I wouldn't let them choose a college that was near me. So yes.
Okay. So how are you approaching this beautiful timestamp relationship that they were living with you in the same town? How are you approaching this to like letting them go?
Yeah. So my therapist reframed the way that I describe this. So I used to describe it as like, I know I'm going to have probably a depressive episode. Like this is such a big part of how I walk through the world as, you know, this girl dad. And then he just is like, no, you're not having a depressive episode. You're not going to have a depressive episode. Like you have anticipatory grief right now and you're going to be grieving it. And I was like, oh, I like that language so much better. Like I'm just grieving. And, you know, like most things, you can hold multiple things at the same time. Like I am like super pumped, like jealous. Like, you know, I love college. Like they have like great years ahead. And at the same time, I have to try really hard to let them know that, hey, you might not have the great college experience. Like I don't want to have like super high expectations because I did. You know, lots of people had like it's just they still haven't found themselves till after college. So, you know, I'm tempering that as much as I can. But yeah, I'm already like at a loss of I don't have any answers. We'll have to have a future podcast of the aftermath of them being in college. 'Cause I think there's something beautiful about adults making sure, parents in particular, that your life chapters are not only tethered to your children's life chapters. So they've got college coming up. I want them both to study abroad because that's the biggest regret of people that go to college is that they didn't study abroad. So I want them to be in a foreign country. I did not do that. I'll financially cover it. Hence your financial psychology. People should listen to those episodes so it can happen. And then, you know, they're going to fall in love and they're going to, you know, maybe they'll have kids and they'll have their own apartment and they'll be independent. They'll, you know, living their first real job, their life chapters. And as a parent, you don't want it just to be their life chapters. So I'm looking forward to like what's independent of being a parent of, you know, just making sure that I have shifts.
I've really noticed you have these, to use your word you just did now, shifts and these reframes about many of these situations in your life. I can't help but think how beneficial that is.
Oh, thank you. I wish everyone who is trained in psychology or thinks about psychology actually use it. As someone who's in the profession, many psychologists, and you know as well, are pretty unhappy, undesirable people who could really use using the skills themselves. There's a lot of psychological tools available, and I think, you know, we can't be great parents if we don't start using this stuff to kind of work on our own brains and our own minds and how we walk through the world.
You talk about there's a lot of psychological tools available. Based on the discussion we're having right now, what would be an applicable tool or way of thinking or way of being that parents can implement to reframe these thoughts around changes and just any situation?
I mean, to go with the same thread from before, I think I don't know if you read Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, had a big impact on me. I was 17 years old when I had to read it in school. And it's basically the idea of a guy who's unstuck in time and he bounces around for different ages. And there is no, the present, past, and future all at the same time because he has no idea like which point he's going to be in. One day he wakes up, he's 15. Next time he's 85. Next time he's 35. Next time he's 17. And it's good to walk through the world, I think, of having your past, present, and future self. So one of the best tools is really playing with, you know, how far have I come from the person that I was 2 years ago when my kids were still kind of stumbling around through high school, and then what's my future self? What do I want my future self at the age of 60 to be saying to me now at the age of 51 in terms of like what advice they want to have? And when you start bouncing around time-wise and you say like, okay, at the age of 60, if I'm still doing the same 10 scientific publications a year and still having the same two characters that I have, that I play cards with and drink bourbon with, and still just do the same gym routine, that's pretty lame in terms of like what am I waiting for? Like there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of like things to discover out there to do. And so you can't just say I want to reinvent myself. You really want to have that precision in terms of, well, what do you want in 10 years from now? Like, what do you want yourself to do? Like, do you want to be speaking another language? Do you want to be traveling more within your country, out of your country? Do you want to learn about new cultures? Are you happy in your current romantic relationship? Do you want to explore different parts of yourself? Have you outgrown your friends and the versions of yourself that they elicit from you? And these are all tough questions, and they may lead to some short-term painful outcomes. You might have to break up with some friends. You might want to be moving. You might want to be switching jobs. You might want to, there's a term that I took from Jay Van Bevel, which is the idea of a 10% retirement. And that you're just you start reducing the status gains from the work achievement part of yourself. And maybe you duck out a little bit and you absorb. That doesn't mean you don't get the same pay raises. You don't get the same promotions. You're not going to be fired, but maybe you don't go all in, at it every single day. And that's something definitely I've done, like in the course of the past 5 or 10 years, is like, just to the outside world, it might not appear that way, but internally I've slowed down in terms of how many things I did.
I've got like 2 different angles or 3. Great answer. My brain's going to this output has slowed down. And earlier we were talking about how it was, this high level of output. And I don't think you used the word achievement, but there was a sense of seeking achievement to cope you used earlier. Reflecting back, how much, if any at all, was that desire to achieve and have a high level output influenced by money?
It's in there. It's more of the social status game.
Like more of the social status, yeah.
It's like I grew up as a twin. And when you grow up with a twin, anyone who's a multiple could probably understand, is you kind of put flags into this foreign landscape of, I'm the smart one, I'm the funny one, like I'm the athlete, I'm the best looking, I'm the best couple. And you're kind of trying to, there's just these games you play because people look at you as this singular creature. And so you're basically trying to have this uniqueness seeking motive that really activate all the time. And the social status game is we have to figure out like what flags are our hands rigidly attached to that we constantly feel like a compulsion almost to just plant that in on a daily basis. And you've got people that are online that like, like just being a troll, like the idea I can get under your skin. Like, Sean, I can control your thoughts and your feelings because I can get under your skin. I can piss you off. I can land you. And there's a status game there of like, I can get power and dominance and control, and people appreciate me, and people will like my comments, and people are like, yeah, go get him. Like, that's like, Sean's freaking so annoying. Like, Canada's better than the United States. Always mentioning it every episode. Like, let's bring him down. And you have to really, as a human being, every one of us has to like think about really carefully, like, what's the social status game that you're playing? For me, like someone who goes to the gym, I can't ignore that. You can't not be in these games, but you have to be very aware to make sure there's good intentions behind it. And it's not compulsory where you're losing yourself, but instead you're enhancing yourself. So for someone like me that's been going to the gym since the 8th grade, when I was 13 years of age, I was a skinny ectomorph, like just like my dad, like physically, I was just like a potato skin. Just like you just would not want to stare at me for more than like a couple minutes. And so one of the things in the beginning was a coping mechanism, just put on this armor, this massive amount of muscle onto my frame, and you get this little bit of body dysmorphia. It's very common in boys who work out, of just like getting very obsessed with like making sure like there's symmetry and there's size, and at a certain point you realize like, oh shoot, I'm not in control of this social status game. Like, it's controlling me. And then you do it for you. And like the beauty of like, what can I do with no illicit drug in my body? Like, what is my human potential in terms of like physicality? And that's a much cooler game than terms of how can I be the biggest person possible to try to intimidate as many people as possible.
There's another reframe. You just got these wonderful reframes, and it's true. I remember many points that I was doing something, and I love your word, an armor. The armor doesn't have to be just muscles. My armor was a suit and a tie, and
you are
when I realized, when I realized that, yeah, that was an armor, and letting that go, it just felt great. But then I was like, hey, can I still look good? So I appreciate that comment, and I love the word armor. You mentioned about power and control in this social status game. I recently had a conversation with Deborah Kaplan. I don't know if you remember her. You and her had a good conversation. She's a sex therapist at the financial therapy.
Loved her.
So she was talking about how power and control, I'm going back to like relationships here. Power and control are present in every relationship. It's how we navigate them. And this conversation you had around social status, power and control is there. It's how we navigate it. I want to shift your comment around social status to relationships. How have you, if anything at all, been able to have this awareness, or maybe through your research, seen that power and control is there, but it's how we manage it?
Yeah, there's two great terms that two female researchers, separate researchers, like brought this up. Rosalind Chow, love her work, where she talks about sponsorship and the idea of you use your power to actually basically like provide a platform for someone else to showcase like what they're capable of. And she talks about it a lot in the workplace, networking. It's a beautiful concept. It's not just mentorship. It's the idea of sponsoring. And just think of it as like back in the 80s with Sally Struthers would talk about like sponsoring a child, like you'd give them a certain amount of food, money per month for food and immunizations. And it's the idea of like psychologically with my social capital, I'm going to sponsor you. And like, okay, how do I get the financial psychological wisdom of Sean into more circles? And it's just like, as soon as those two words come that are evoked, and for whatever reason, Sean comes up, and I try to bring him into whatever that thing is, that conversation, bring them in front of a person that happens there. And then the other term is amplification. And this is really about minorities and majorities. Is like, if you're in the majority, so for me, I'm a middle-aged white guy who's relatively fit, especially for my age, which becomes easy because most people don't take care of themselves. And then, so I am physically, demographically in the majority. If someone's in the minority who's near me, what we know from psychological research is if I share their ideas, I name them, I name their ideas, I physically direct my eyes and my body towards them so people can see exactly who is the progenitor of these great ideas. Their ideas get a better fair shake. People are more likely to pay attention and consider and engage those ideas. I end up looking amazing because I'm basically this, in terms of the benevolent attribution of sharing the space with them. And then the group gets better because they get access to the ideas from someone who may be a little bit quieter, more introverted, or just doesn't feel that there is a sufficient psychological safety for her to share her ideas. So the idea of amplification and sponsorship is a nice way of using power, control, and dominance for the forces of improving people's lives and improving the intelligence of groups, as opposed to just creating a platform for me or you to get better and stronger.
This idea of sponsorship and amplification, you just related it back to this idea of we're social creatures and social relationships are key to happiness. And you specifically talked about the group, but I can't help but think how through our conversation, you've been sharing how you've been doing that with your daughters. And what a great parenting approach.
Yeah, I actually, to go back to something, thank you. To go back to something I said earlier, I really believe we have to be more the parents of all the kids in our ecosystem. And so I regularly, like I mentioned, I was the chaperone of 18 kids in a house. So over the course of a week, 18-year-olds, I got to know a lot of them. If I find any of the interesting careers that these 16, remove my twins, 16 other 18-year-olds in my neighborhood, I hear from an adult that there is an opening, a spot, an internship that could potentially be an affordance to them, I'm going to get that opportunity to them. I'm going to sponsorship, amplification, make sure that they are aware that there is this great 18-year-old that's out there that they should be considering, and this is the future of their team, group, organization, company, mission, initiative. And we should all be looking for that. And honestly, it is a great use of playing the status game where it's a triple win. Win for you because you look like a good person for doing it. Win for them because they get basically an opportunity to kind of expose their potential and ideas. And then the group gets wiser.
That's so good. Just benefits all around. I would love to hear these 18 or called 16 students, young adults, what their experience was with Todd there. But maybe that's for another podcast, being 16 girls talking about Todd and how much amplification he gave. I as you talk about this group, you seem like you're really involved with the group of your daughter's ecosystem and probably other ecosystems. This question's coming from your principal in the Art of Insubordination. When you look at groups of your children's friends or just your children, either or both, when you think about questioning authority or dissenting in a principled way, as you talk about, how do you think about teaching children how to question authority and be a principled rebellion?
So I am doing this all the time. Basically, it's really tough to get older because it's hard to rage against the machine when you become the machine. So I'm a big fan of younger people recognizing the foibles and problems and directions of the older generation. And so one thing we know is that the number one variable that increases the odds that your message is going to be heard by the majority or the people in power or the people that are your overlords that are controlling you in some way is consistency. And consistency doesn't mean saying the same thing over. A lot of activists get this wrong. They just repeat the same message. Like PETA is terrible at this. I don't even know. Ethical treatment of animals. I forget what the P is for. But they're basically out there making sure that no one does experiments with animals, and fur coats should be disappear. That they're out like bombing laboratories and perfume factories and that sort of thing, and throwing blood at people like who are at fashion shows who are wearing outfits that are made out of animal skin. And they repeat this message for decades now. And the thing is that you can even hear in the tone of my voice. Like I sort of have like, the cause is lost. Like I love animals, but it's just like, it's so obnoxious. It's so non-discerning. It's so crude in terms of it's all or nothing. It's good or bad. Like there are bad players and there's good players. And if you don't listen to what we say, that you're the bad players that happen there. Well, it gets really complicated. It's actually not even complicated. It's in the real world. The question is, how do you create future medicine for conditions that humans are suffering from, ailments, diseases, viruses? Where do you develop them from? So do you do it on babies and adults, or do you do it on animals, or do you do it on non-living creatures? And sometimes in stage 1 and 2 for clinical trials, you have to do it on something that has cells to make it work. And so it is an unfortunate thing to save humanity. Sometimes it's the trolley car problem in ethics, is to save humanity. Sometimes like some smaller celled creatures have to, die for the cause that happens there. And it's all trade-offs that happen there. So if the consistency to be more effective as an activist, as a young person, is you explain why it's necessary and valuable to follow this direction versus the status quo. And I'm really big about explaining of like, you want to make sure that you tell it in story form. You want to be able to say like, okay, here's an alternative way to develop viruses, to develop vaccines, and to develop medical treatment. Now, if you can say that and you can clarify that and explain why financially, psychologically, and in terms of the harm that it's caused, that's the way, you're going to get some attention. But if you only point out what's a problem and you don't offer solutions, it's really hard to consistently take your side on this. And so when these young people have teachers that they think are unfair, and they have favorites in their class, or they're grading them on an unfair metric that happens there, I'm always explaining, use behavioral evidence as much as humanly possible, and explain clearly, and kind of often without emotion, of help, and start with the question, help me understand, like, why is it that when I was absent, I had to take an exam, and in this classroom, I have seen this person, and this person be absent for a week for family vacations, and they were given a sufficient amount of time to study and prepare for an exam. Like, why am I being treated differently than them? And just let them, don't say they're sexist, don't say they're racist, just let them answer that question first, and then the ace in the hole later, you could say, I did notice one difference between myself and the other people that I mentioned. But don't lead with that, because then they're going to get defensive. Your job is to bring their defenses down so that you can persuade them. Your job is not to bring their defenses up so you can make a political statement that gets you none of the things you want.
A masterclass. Thank you. That was great. And I appreciate you point out that we bring up a problem, no solution. It just seems like this is happening so much. And yeah, you don't get ears to listen to you when you do that.
I remember when Me Too first came out, and I cannot find this clip. There's a television clip I need to find. There was a panel on CNN, and it was 3 women and 1 guy. And they're having a conversation, and they're talking about, I think it was Matt Lauer. And he had that button behind his desk where he was able to automatically lock his door, and with the women that were in his room. And then everybody was yelling, cable TV network. And then this guy very quietly asked this question. which was, I'm just curious, like if you're a heterosexual man in a work culture and you're working 60, 70 hours a week and you're not having time to really meet anybody else and you wanted to date someone at work, like how could that work? And everybody just piled on him. Was like, just the fact that you asked that question, you're part of the problem. You shouldn't even be thinking about dating your coworkers. You sick freak. Like, what's wrong? And I remember I was watching this. I was like, that was a pretty good question. Like, he was just like honest. He was like an innocent guy who just didn't know skill wise, environment, situation wise of what to do. And I use that as an analog in terms of a lot of us don't know what to do in the situation. We didn't get a handbook of what we shouldn't say, what's no longer an acceptable expression that happens there. Some people are much more well versed on this. And what a beautiful society would it be is if we assume you never got the memo yet. We're to give you grace and like, hey, you may not have heard, but like, this is no longer the way that you would treat somebody in the workplace. And maybe, just maybe, you'll get a lot of people that respond and be like, my God, I'm so glad you told me that. I had no idea. Like, I can't wait to come back in on Monday and like not do something wrong. It's great.
Mm-hmm. It's so true. It's like I don't know if there's ever been a conversation when you've attacked someone and tell them what they completely do all wrong and they're idiots that they're like, oh yeah, you're right. Let me take your view.
Think about performance enhancing drugs. So, go back to baseball because I know nothing about hockey, right? You had all these baseball players all of a sudden just blasting these baseballs out of the park, tons of home runs. Imagine if the conversation started first, which is, what properties can someone ingest or do to their body that makes them perform better? Which one should go on the okay list? Which one should go on, damn, add that to your training list? Which should go on, hell no, that's unacceptable list? And which one should go on, question mark? Well, let's have a conversation about this. But instead of 4 columns, the conversation was, whoa. You're not fully responsible and accountable for all that great athletic performance because you took this pill. Like you're done. You're done. Like everything we did is wiped out. Imagine how cool it would be if the conversation was how I described it. And then in terms of adults and kids, just really kind of boring. Yeah, what if you get LASIK surgery? Why is that acceptable? And why is like taking, testosterone not acceptable? I don't know. I actually don't even know the answer. I mean, what if you didn't need LASIK surgery, but you got it to have 20/10 vision, which is what Tiger Woods did? It's not a performance enhancing drug. It's a performance enhancing procedure. What if you have more money and you can afford like a different type of personal trainer in terms of improving your hand-eye coordination? Is that considered like a performance enhancing blank? Like those are the kind of conversations that we should be having. And as a parent, as a teacher, as anyone working in some capacity with younger generation, I do think that it's worthwhile to think about how can we form this in a question with hypotheses as opposed to a statement with great clarity and zero uncertainty.
What a powerful teaching or principle you could leave with your kids. It just opens up the door to them being more flexible in their thinking, them being more, well, you write a lot about psychological flexibility. And it seems to me, in a way, this is what you're talking about, where they can jump from curiosity to being a principled rebel to being holding my principle correctly to then being like, hey, maybe I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, my big collaborator, Patrick McKnight, and I, we often talk about is that if we had to take all of our research we study social anxiety, curiosity, meaning and purpose in life, creativity, grit, all these things that we study, the big umbrella over all of them is what you just described: uncertainty management. And really, if we start there, we can actually realize like the world is hard to manage and deal with. And so let me not call you a narcissist right away. Let me not call you a problem right away. Let me not silence you right away. Like, what uncertainty do I have about the situation that I'm not considering because I'm not you and I'm not writing your biography?
Uncertainty management. That is just great. That's what we got to do. That's lifelong, I guess, goal is to figure out how do we manage uncertainty.
Yeah. And you can't close it. Like that's, like this conversation to me is like pure pleasure and like giving away psychological insights for free to the world. Is tons of uncertainty, right? Just earlier, I got totally stuck stumbling upon this PD example. It didn't go anywhere that I wanted to. That's part of having like a conversation. These things happen and you absorb it, you take it, modify your behavior, improve like the fit for your behavior for the next situation. And you give yourself grace, you give other people grace. And then that is the only way that people can actually rise to the occasion. If it's rigid, controlled, and there's no opportunity for you to flounder, because people say all the right things: growth mindset, resilience, bounce back, psychological safety, words that I've been using all day today. But it's really like very precisely like, what are you going to do in your social interaction that's going to allow someone to reveal something that you may not agree with and you may not understand fully right off the bat? And then what are you going to do to try to extract even more information to prevent a miscommunication?
I like how you just touched on that last part. You talked about with precision, like how are you going to perhaps even utilize some of these things you talked about, like psychological safety, psychological flexibility, these terms that I think get thrown out are talked about a lot. Yet at times we don't with great precision do them. What have you seen from the people who are doing these things as opposed to just talking about them? What is it? A trait? Is it a mindset? Is it just the fact you just do the work?
I mean, the ideal way that you develop psychological strengths and develop flexibility using your strengths and develop situational awareness to figure out what to deploy with the demands that you're facing right now is basically states, like momentary states. You're reading the situation. You're doing a quick overview in terms of what capacities do you have available, what's in your tank in terms of available energy, and then what is reading the other person, the other people that are there, like what would deter the other person, and what would actually like attract the other person. Like this, it's a lot of mental activity just to say something that keeps someone engaged with you for more than a minute. There's a lot of activity. Like you're reading the situation, you're reading yourself, you're reading other people, and you're also reading like what alternatives are available for each of you to get rewards in that moment, because you're competing against that for someone's finite attention and energy. So with all of that, there has to be clear precision. Like one of the things that I do with this science of curiosity that's precise is I try to describe things, my opening sentences to topics, like when you're asking me questions, that's a little bit interesting, a little bit extra sexy, a little bit like I kind of want to make your eyes pop a little bit just to kind of get you fully like attentive to what's coming next. So it's like a topic sentence. It's like it's the journalistic colloquialism of don't bury the lead. And I think a lot of people, they bury the lead. And so, when we were having the conversation before and talking about like, how to kind of like train youth to be more principled rebels, is I just said, let's talk about performance enhancing drugs, because that comes out of nowhere. So that's what I would call a curiosity lure. It's as opposed to me like setting up the example. I pop it first, and then we'll do a deeper dive in there that goes in there. So they're like these very simple molecular tools that you can use in conversations to try to persuade people to be a better communicator, and other things.
John, I appreciate the ways you think, and thanks for sharing that curiosity lore. I love that approach, and I see our time is come to an end. I feel like I could chat with you all day and pick your brain. I know you're working on a new book, and I've been asking people the similar question that I'm going to ask you, but it's in the realm of your book. Let's imagine that you're now at end of life. It doesn't matter how old you are. You're sitting on a front porch, looking out at a view that gives you complete peace, ease, and contentment. You decide to write one last article, and you're giving it to your children's children on what you learned to have a meaningful life. What would be a message in that article?
Damn. I like that you didn't make it the typical obituary one. I like the way that you describe it. That's a good one. I mean, for me, I really think psychological flexibility is the je ne sais quoi. And I think it's that everyone has this jagged profile of skills, abilities, personality traits, like built-in capacities and things that you've developed over the course of your lifetime. And the way that you're going to create the greatest success in your life, however you want to define success, really enjoyable social interaction, experience flow while you're writing, hit your PR in the gym, whatever the success is defined as, is you have to figure out what element, what dimension of that jagged profile is going to work best in this situation that I'm in right now. So there is forget the notion of, I wrote a book on curiosity is the jam. Angela Duckworth wrote a book on grit is the jam. Michael McCulloch wrote a book on forgiveness, that's the jam. Robert Emmons wrote a book on gratitude, that's the jam. So everyone's got their jam. And I'm saying, in some ways, we're all wrong. Is like, we're this big, massive, messy profile. And the thing is, what are you going to pull out right then and there because you read the situation to go in there? Don't hold any dimension, capacity, or strength too tightly, because you might need something else for this situation that comes next.
Sounds like you're managing uncertainty there.
Exactly.
Todd, thank you so much. The parent in me has this one last question, and it's my last one, I promise. Is
you talked about questions.
You talked about your daughters seeing that future self and asking, what are they doing today? So I believe you mentioned you're 51. For that 61-year-old, if having a happy and thriving relationship with your children is still critically important, is like it is right now, with this new chapter, with them having more independence, living on their own, what are some of the new principles that you're going to have to do to make sure that 61-year-old's like, you did it?
So we have to resist not turning this into another hour conversation, because it could easily become one. One of the things for me is my daughters have never seen me deeply romantic in love with someone else. And so for me, I think that's a really important missing piece of my life and their lives in terms of modeling, of them to see like, what does like a truly healthy, fully loving relationship look like? And so my task is to find that, cultivate that, develop that. No timeline, like, whatever happens, it happens. And then, have my girls see like that this is like, it's possible. This is what it looks like. I can deconstruct that for them. And that's a beautiful thing. And I think that we can't leave this for Disney and Pixar to determine like, here are the models of like what romantic love looks like. And I think you can use great precision in describing like, this is what I do to handle conflict. This is what I do to express my affection. This is what I do that is unique to us as like a ritual that we have, because it's like built into the fabric of our day to make sure that like we spend time with each other with nothing intervening and intercepting like our time together that happens there. And I want to have that, deconstruct that, show them that, help them get that. And part of my chapter is to kind of do that for myself.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And Todd, thanks for everything here. For listeners who are curious about your work, where would you point them towards, and talk about your awesome newsletter as well?
Yeah, you could find everything. I mean, it's my favorite thing to write now is my Substack called Provoked. Easy to find in a Google search, just Provoked Kashdan. And yeah, it's my vehicle to communicate. I have no overlords. I can write about anything that I want to. And I've never had this freedom since I was in grade school to just like free creative writing classes. And so, yeah, for the next 40 years, this is my plan, is to have this vehicle. So that is the place where I will share all our new research findings from the Wellbeing Laboratory and join the community.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate your time.
You are such an exceptional asker of questions that I had bemoaned the fact that I didn't follow up on all the amazing things about your grandma, your dad, and your kids and everything else. But this was amazing.
Thanks for watching this week's episode. If you enjoyed the chat, please like the video and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time.